And now that we are done with the UFC 302 main event discussion, we will get into the rest of the card, and it starts in the co-main event where former middleweight champion Sean Strickland will be taking on former middleweight title challenger Paulo Costa, number 1 versus number 7 for 25 minutes or less. In 2023, I think it's safe to make an argument that Sean Strickland was the fighter of the year. He went 3-0, beating Nassourdine Imavov, finishing Abus Magomedov, and dominating Israel Adesanya in September of that year to become the 185-pound world champion. The reign was short-lived as he gave up the belt to Dricus du Plessis in the first pay-per-view of the year in January at UFC 297 in Canada. Dricus beat Sean Strickland to become the champion in a very close and very competitive split decision. It looks like Dricus is going to be fighting Israel Adesanya for his first title defense, potentially at UFC 305, yet to be confirmed, however. But Sean Strickland is not wasting any time. Just fought January 20th, fighting again here on what will be June 1st. Pretty active guy as he has been for the past couple of years. Fought 3 times in 23, as I said, and 3 times in 2022. He's looking to make it another 3-fight year, and the second one will come against former title challenger Paulo Costa, the ultra-dangerous Brazilian. Paulo Costa, what do you have to say about this guy? He's got one victory since fighting for the title in September of 2020 in a losing effort to Israel Adesanya. He lost to Marvin Vettori in October of 21. He beat Luke Rockhold in August of 22, and then lost to Robert Whittaker just a few months ago in February at UFC 298, headlined by Volkanovski and Topuria. He's had weight issues, he's had hair transplants, he's had the secret juice, and everything in between. Oh, and by the way, he's thrown out the first pitch at the New York Mets game on Tuesday morning. The guy is so beloved. He's such an interesting character. At one time, he was almost a villain, and he rectified his career, and now everybody just likes watching him fight. His fight with Marvin Vettori happened at light heavyweight, and it was an incredible back-and-forth fight. His fight with Luke Rockhold was one of the weirdest and most disgusting fights I've seen in quite some time. And what a performance he had against Robert Whittaker in February. Yes, he came out on the losing side of things, but looked the best that we'd really seen him since before that Israel Adesanya fight when he fought Yoel Romero in August of 2019. After starting 5-0 in the UFC with 4 finishes to earn that title shot against Adesanya, he's since lost 3 out of 4 fights. It's just been a very weird career, to be quite honest with you, in the UFC for Paulo, but he can put that all to the wayside here. He's only 33 years old, as is Sean Strickland. Both these guys, coming off of losses, need some sort of momentum builder here. Obviously, if you're Paulo Costa and you beat the former champ, number 1 ranked Strickland, you throw your name right into the hat of the title contention race. But if you're Strickland, I feel like he almost needs to prove that his win over Adesanya wasn't a fluke and that he can climb back to holding that number 1 spot, that he can climb back into the driver's seat of the division and become even a 2-time champion potentially down the road. I feel like there is a lot at stake for both of these guys in similar ways and in also non-similar ways. Strickland, been the champion, wants to become champion again. Paulo, I don't even know. Does he want to be the champion? He's kind of like this, like another version of Kevin Holland, where he's just here to fight, good fights, and that's it. He doesn't really talk about the title very much, but he's up here fighting the best fighters in the world over the past few years, and Kevin Holland will just fight anybody, anyone, anytime. Very, very weird circumstances, very weird situation. Being that it's 5 rounds, it almost leads me to believe that maybe there is a title shot at stake here behind the scenes for these guys. I mean, I would assume, and I think Dana even said that Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker is the true number 1 contender fight that's happening at June 22nd in Saudi Arabia. Good news is they're only 3 weeks apart from one another, so we can kind of just let everybody be until both these fight cards come to a close. Let me know what you guys think. Could this be a potential number 1 contender fight? And I will just say here that being that we have those 2 extra rounds, it seems to favor Sean Strickland. In the 5-round fights that Paulo has had, he has lost. He went the distance with Marvin Vettori and lost the decision. He fought Adesanya and got finished in the second round. Robert Whittaker fight was close, but it was a 3-rounder. Luke Rockhold, which he won, was a 3-rounder. He never had a 5-round main event during his rise to being a title contender. And on the other side, Sean Strickland has went the distance for 5 straight rounds in 4 of his last 5 fights. The only fight that didn't was when he finished BOUCE Magomedov. He went the distance with Jared Cannonier in a razor-close fight. He went the distance with Dricus to lose his title. He dominated Izzy for 25 minutes to become champion, and he beat Nassourdine Imavov for 25 minutes. He has been there and done that multiple times now, going that full 25. And Paulo, yeah, he can still be dangerous as the fight goes on, but adding those 10 extra minutes could be the deciding factor in this fight. Give me all your thoughts on this one. Definitely a wacky one. 2 wacky characters for sure, but I like the fight. The fight should be very good from an X's and O's perspective. Sean Strickland, a guy that likes to press forward with heavy volume, heavy pressure on the stand-up game. Paulo Costa, not a very high volume guy, but someone who throws big, looping, heavy shots whenever he sees fit. If he can manage his gas tank appropriately, that makes the fight a little bit more interesting, because we've not really seen Sean Strickland get put away. It's not something that happens that often. He got finished by Alex Pereira in 2022, but prior to that, it had been since 2018 the last time that Sean Strickland had been finished. So Paulo's going to have to pull something out that we don't see very often in Sean Strickland opponents in order to get this victory. And now we'll move into the rest of the card. It's not the craziest pay-per-view in the world, but it's a really solid card top to bottom. Obviously, the main event, the light heavyweight title, the co-main, a 5-round big-time middleweight scrap. But there are some fun fights on the remainder of the card. We'll dip down into 170 pounds next. Scratch that. We're staying at 185. I forgot Kevin Holland is always going back and forth, back and forth. This featured bout will be Kevin Holland, who's lost 2 straight fights, taking on Michal Oleksiejczuk, who's lost 2 of his last 3. Should be a fun fight for as long as it lasts, though. Kevin Holland, never really in a boring fight. Say what you will about the MVP fight at UFC 299. I thought it was just a very good performance from Michael Venom Page in his UFC debut, to be quite honest with you. I've seen way worse fights than that. And for Oleksiejczuk, a guy that is a very, very promising and powerful kickboxer, is coming off of being submitted by Michel Pereira, and his loss before that was submission to Caio Bahaio. And for Kevin Holland, you cannot sleep on his submission game. He does have 7 submission victories to his name, 14 knockouts, and Oleksiejczuk also has 14 knockouts, only 1 submission victory. So 2 guys that like to get a lot of finishes. Oleksiejczuk been finished 6 of his 7 losses. Holland only been finished 4 of his 11. So Mikel been finished a little bit more frequently. However, I still think it's a very enticing fight. It feels like a bounce back scenario for Kevin Holland, a bounce back matchup. He's lost 4 of his last 6 fights, which is crazy to say that. The other 2 losses were Wonderboy Thompson and Khamzat Chimaev. Squeezed in between was a victory over Santiago Ponzinibbio and Michael Chiesa, both of those by finish. And although Michal Oleksiejczuk's coming off of his loss, this is the biggest opportunity of his career to get a win over a big-name guy, a big mouth in Kevin Holland, and put himself into the rankings. Well, I guess maybe not, because Kevin's not ranked at middleweight. He's the 15th ranked welterweight. Nevertheless, he has victories over Chidi Njokuani, Cody Brundage, Sam Alvey, Shamil Gamzatov, and Modestas Bukauskas. All of those are good victories, none of which hold the weight as a win over Kevin Holland would for Oleksiejczuk. And at 31 years old, man, I know that there is still potential in there for Kevin Holland, but he just doesn't seem to really want to take that next step. Right when you think he may is when he will falter the most. So we'll see if he can turn the corner here, if he'll decide to stay at 185 or go back down to 170. I feel he looks better and has a more promising potential at welterweight, but what do I know? I'm just a guy that sits behind the microphone and talks about these amazing fighters. But I'm always going to tune in when Kevin Holland is fighting. I would love to see him get a big bounce back victory, but it would be great on the other side of the coin, excuse me. Oh boy. If you can hear the sudsiness in my voice, I'm a little congested. A day out in the rain on Sunday golf and did me in for some congestion and runny nose and scratchy throat and apparently mistaken corn for coin. That said, it would be cool to see Michal Oleksiejczuk get the biggest win of his career as well. So somebody's got to bounce back. Who's it going to be? And bounce back may just be the word to describe the UFC 302 main card, because Jailton Almeida returning quickly from UFC 299. He wants to get back in the win column after getting not exposed necessarily by Curtis Blades, but having his hype train halted very abruptly, I will say. Curtis Blades finished Jailton Almeida in round 2 of their fight at UFC 299. But we cannot forget that prior to getting knocked out 36 seconds into the second round, Jailton Almeida took Curtis Blades down 7, 8, maybe even 9 times. Now, to be fair, he didn't do a lot with those takedowns, and when he went for the takedown again, that is when he got knocked out. But this seems to be a matchup where he will be able to do a little bit more with his wrestling and grappling. He's taken on King Kong, Alexandr Romanov, who I once was very high on, have since kind of faltered out. He's still a top 15 ranked fighter, maybe can still get some victories, but in terms of beating the best of the best, I think it's a long, long way away for Romanov, but he could shut me up real quick by beating Jailton Almeida. He's lost 2 of his last 3 fights. He is coming off of a victory last July against Blagoy Ivanov. Prior to that, lost to Alexander Volkov and Marcin Tybura. Before that, though, he was on a tear, getting 5 straight victories in the UFC. His physique kind of goes back and forth, too. Sometimes he looks shredded and really fit. Other times he looks a little bit on the bigger side, tips the scale at 266. I don't know what he's going to look like here physically in the cage. We know Almeida is absolutely chiseled out of marble. And hear me out here. If he loses Jailton Almeida, maybe it's time to have him go back down to the weight class he started at in the UFC, light heavyweight. Now, that could be more of a Monday conversation. If he wins here, he can very well still solidify himself as a top 10 player in this division. But I think it's worth keeping that in mind. He only comes in around 232, 235. Jailton Almeida is not a big heavyweight by any means. If he can shred back down to light heavyweight, I think he could be a very legitimate problem. But I'll hold that for Monday because he may just be able to bounce back. And then I'll just quickly mention some other fights. Nothing real big storyline-wise for me, but there are some names here that at least deserve a little bit of love. Randy Rude Boy Brown, friend of the program. He's pinned on the Instagram profile. He's taken on Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Randy Brown, I think, is just one of those guys that is must watch in the welterweight division. Very long, very rangy, kind of built like Jalen Turner is down in the lightweight division. He's 33 years old, 12 finishes to his name. He's won 2 of his last 3 fights, coming off of a big knockout in February against Muslim Salikov. And Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, not as big of a name, more of a seasoned veteran at 37 years old, but he fought to a draw against Hanat Fakhretdinov last November, and prior to that, had won 2 straight fights, including, up until UFC 299, the only man to beat Benoit Saint Denis in the UFC. Now we know Dustin Poirier has a win as well. So this should be a pretty competitive fight. Very fun while it lasts. Dos Santos has 17 finishes to his name as well. This fight, the prelim headliner, I believe it is. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. The prelim headliner, Cesar Almeida and Roman Kopylov, 2 dangerous strikers. Cesar Almeida, 5-0. I'm getting excited. 5-0, perfect record, 4 knockouts. Someone who's beaten Alex Pereira in kickboxing before. May have to fact check this one, but maybe even beat Israel Adesanya. I could be wrong, but he definitely has beaten Alex Pereira. He's 1-0 in the UFC. He got a victory on the Contender Series. Before that, fought in Shudo, Brazil. Very, very dangerous fighter. 36 years old, though, so he's no spring chicken. We don't have a lot of time to work with him, but we didn't have a lot of time with Alex Pereira either, and he's become a 2-weight world champion. And Roman Kopylov is coming off of a loss in February to Anthony Hernandez, but prior to that was on a 4-fight knockout victory streak. Someone who is very, very dangerous. I believe someone's going out in this scrap. And then we've got guys like Grant Dawson on this card looking to bounce back after his loss to Bobby Green. Phil Rowe versus Jake Matthews. Nico Price, Alex Morono. Mickey Gall is back for the first time in 2 years, taking on Bazel Hafez, who is the man who debuted on short notice and took Jack Della Maddalena to the brink in their back and forth fight. And we've got Aline Perez, Jocelyn Edwards, and Mitch Raposo versus Andre Lima. So top to bottom, a solid card. I think there's a lot of people looking to right the wrongs and bounce back on this card. That really seems to be the storyline for a lot of these fights, and that makes me very, very excited to tune in to UFC 302. Give me all of your predictions in the comments below, who you think's going to win, what your bets are, and everything in between. If you enjoyed this preview, please be sure to drop a like. Subscribe to the channel if you are new so you never miss my previews and breakdowns of the biggest fights every single week. I also recap the most meaningful results and give my thoughts and opinions on breaking news and fight announcements. You can join the community on social media at the BAJ MMA and follow along on your favorite audio listening platform if you like long form podcast episodes. They release every Friday and Monday on Spotify, Apple, and many more. Enjoy the pay-per-view this weekend, and I will see you in the next video.